Hi there, my name is Trent, and in this video I want to describe a way of understanding the music theory of the guitar, well, a way of understanding music theory on the guitar that may be different than what you're used to, and maybe it's a little easier. My hope is that this helps you to understand the instrument better and to understand the differences between our instrument and other instruments like the piano. Most of the music theory that I learned was all based around the key of C, which is a fantastic key for understanding theory for a few reasons. One is that there is no sharps or flats, so when you're saying the note names of the key of C, you don't have to say any names like F sharp, D sharp, all of these other notes that are in keys like E. But one problem is that the key of C is not really a natural key to the guitar. Playing a C major scale on the guitar will a lot of times, the first one people will learn will look like this, which involves switching strings at a couple of different points. And I found when teaching people about music theory on the guitar, this was a little bit of a challenge to understand, because in order to understand why the scale is set up that way, you have to understand the way that the guitar is tuned and the intervals that the open strings are tuned to, and then how to switch between strings at those different points in the scale. So what I came up with was a way of understanding and learning theory on the guitar that focuses on a single horizontal plane using one string. For the piano, it has, I think of it as a one-dimensional instrument. Doesn't make it an easier instrument to play, but it does make it easier to understand the fundamentals of music on, because when you look at a piano, you have a horizontal plane. You have left to right. And as you go leftward on the piano, the notes get lower. As you go rightward on the piano, the notes get higher. The same thing is true with the guitar. If you go to the right, if I play my open first string, and then I move to the right on the horizontal plane, my notes are going to continue getting higher. If I go leftward, my notes are going to keep getting lower. And this is the exact same way that a piano is set up. Where the challenge comes in is we have an additional dimension on guitar. It's not just a horizontal instrument. If you had a single string guitar, then you would have a purely horizontal instrument. But we also have a vertical dimension, because on the guitar, there's 6 strings, as you know, and when you're changing between the strings, it creates a bit of confusion for new players and even for experienced players. And I find myself having challenges sometimes identifying what note I'm on at certain parts of the neck. And this is because it's not easy to see where C is all over the guitar. Whereas on a piano, the note C always looks the same, and it's a repeating pattern. So once you know what C looks like, it looks the exact same anywhere on the piano, any of the C notes that you find. But on guitar, the notes all kind of look the same. They're all different frets, you have different strings, and it's not as clear of a visual instrument as the piano is. So what I want to show today is a way that I use to understand music theory that I think can help people to internalize some of the basic lessons of music theory and to start understanding better how it applies over both of the dimensions, the horizontal dimension and the vertical dimension of the guitar. So to begin, I want to just describe the basic building blocks of music, which this is how I think of building intervals and chords and scales. And these basic building blocks are what we call half steps and whole steps. And you may be really familiar with these concepts, but just to review, a half step is the distance from one note, let's say the open first string, E, to the very next fret, or the very next note that we can play, which would be F, the first fret. So that would be a half step. And anywhere on the guitar, let's say I'm at the 7th fret here on the 1st string, if I go a half step up from the 7th fret, I'm going to be at the 8th fret. And if I move by half steps all the way, that's what we call the chromatic scale. So the chromatic scale is the scale that includes all of the 12 half steps or the 12 notes before we return to the same note again. So if I move up the chromatic scale from on the open 1st string, I go up each fret until I reach the same note again, the starting point, which is the note E at the 12th fret. And that's where my pattern repeats again. So the other basic building block is the whole step. So half steps are moving by 1 fret at a time, whole step is moving by 2 frets at a time. So if I go from the open string to the 2nd fret, that's what we call a whole step. And so on. I could go in whole steps all the way up by going 2 frets at a time. So these two basic building blocks, whole steps and half steps, are a prerequisite to understanding the way that scales are built. And what we're going to focus on today in this lesson is the major scale, because so much of our music in Western culture is built on this major scale. And we can understand a lot about chords and scales by first mastering the concepts of the major scale and then moving to the intervals that make up the major scale. So an interval, to review, is the distance between two different notes. So if I choose two notes, I'm going to choose two notes that are on the 1st string. So if I choose the open 1st string and the 4th fret, if I played those notes simultaneously at the same time, that's one type of interval. That specific interval is called a major third. But I'll go over the different intervals of the major scale in just a moment. Where I want to start for today's lesson and for the playing part is with showing you how to practice a major scale on one string. This may be new to you. If it is, just follow along and try playing it with me up and down. So I'm going to start with the open 1st string, and then I'm going to go a whole step to the 2nd fret, another whole step to the 4th fret, a half step to the 5th fret, a whole step to the 7th fret, a whole step to the 9th fret, a whole step to the 11th fret, and then a half step to the 12th fret, which is E again, just like we started with at the open string. This is 1 octave higher from the open string. Interesting fact about the 12th fret is that if you divided the space between where your string is suspended at your bridge over here and at the nut of the guitar in exactly half, that's where you'd find the 12th fret. If you divide the length of a string exactly in half, you'll end up with 1 octave higher from the pitch of the open string. So let me review the major scale one more time. I'm going to do it up and down, and then I'm going to talk about how you can derive chords from this scale. So, starting at the open 1st string, it's going to be open, then up a whole step to the 2nd fret, whole step up to the 4th fret, a half step up to the 5th, a whole step to the 7th, a whole step up to the 9th, a whole step up to the 11th, and a half step to the 12th. Now to reverse that pattern, I'm going to start by going down a half step, to the 11th fret, a whole step down to the 9th fret, a whole step down to the 7th fret, a whole step down to the 5th fret, a half step to the 4th fret, a whole step to the 2nd fret, and another whole step back to the open 1st string. So we could say that in this scale, if you're going up the scale or down the scale, you're moving in intervals of seconds, different types of seconds. In order to build chords out of the scale and to figure out what chords belong to each scale, we want to move in the interval that is used for most common chords, and that would be thirds, what we call thirds. So the way that I think about that is that I'm going to go, if I take my first note of the scale and I move to the third note of the scale, that's going to be the interval of a third. So from the open string, if I skip the second note of the scale, the second fret, and I move to the third note of the scale at the fourth fret, that's going to be a third. So another way to think about this is skipping, playing every other note of the scale. The most common type of chord that is used in lots of types of music would be what we call a triad, meaning a chord that's built out of 3 different notes. And to get the triad that goes with the first note of the scale, we would do exactly as I just did. You'd play the open first string, then you'd skip the second note of the scale, you'd move to the third note of the scale, then you'd skip the fourth note of the scale, and play the fifth note of the scale. So when I play these 3 notes, the open string, the third note of the scale, which is the 4th fret, the 5th note of the scale, which is the 7th fret, those are the 3 notes that make up the major triad that goes with this scale. This is an E scale because I'm beginning it from E. This applies anywhere on the guitar though. You can start it from any open string. Let's say I try it from the open second string. I can still play my major scale shape. And I can make my triad that goes along with it by picking out the first, the third, and the fifth note of that scale. So I could play open, the open B, the 4th fret, and the 7th fret. And this makes what we call an arpeggio of the chord, which is just a way of saying that you're playing the notes of the chord at different times, one after the other, rather than playing them all together. So if I play the arpeggio of the scale of the chord, play just like that, versus playing them all together would sound like this. So back to the first string, what I want to show you is how we can move that little arpeggio shape playing the broken chords all the way up in a way to better understand the chords that go along with a major scale. So we're going to move in thirds, meaning skipping a note of the scale each time till we've gotten 3 notes for each chord. So I'm going to show you this going up. It starts with open first string, 4th fret, and 7th fret, because this is the first, the third, and the 5th note of the scale. So if I take that same ratio and I apply it to the second note of the scale, I'm going to start on the 2nd fret, then I skip the next note, which would be the 4th fret, and I go to the 5th fret, and then I would skip the next note of the scale and go up to the 9th fret. So now I have my first chord or arpeggio from the scale, which would be this. The second chord or arpeggio from the scale would start here and go 2nd fret, 5th fret, 9th fret. The third chord or arpeggio of the scale would be starting on the 4th fret, going up to the 7th fret, and then skipping the 9th fret and going to the 11th fret, because we're moving in thirds, meaning we're skipping a note of the scale each time. To go to the 4th note of the scale, we'd be here on the 5th fret, and then we're going to skip the 7th fret, we're going to go to the 9th fret, and then we're going to skip the 11th fret and go up to the 12th fret. And we could continue from there. I want to go back and just review those and play them through one time for you so that hopefully you can follow along and understand where we're going here. So starting with the open first string, we go open. So that's the 1st, 3rd, and 5th note of the scale. Starting on the 2nd fret, we'd go. That's the 2nd, 4th, and 6th note of the scale. here we're on the third note of the scale, 4th fret. So we go 4th fret, 7th fret, 11th fret. Starting back at the 4th note of the scale, we go 7th fret, 9th fret, 12th fret. Then at the 5th note of the scale, which is the 7th fret, we go 7th fret, 11th fret, and then I can extend past the octave to what would be the 2nd note of the scale, or is the 2nd note of the scale, but an octave up. So here it's at the 14th fret. That's my 5th chord or arpeggio of the scale. The 6th would start here at the 9th fret and go 9th fret to the 12th fret up to the 16th fret. And then the final, the 7th and final new arpeggio from the scale would start here at the 11th fret, go up to the 2nd note of the scale, an octave up, which would be at the 14th fret, and then to the 4th note of the scale, an octave up, which would be at the 17th fret. And then here we'd be back at our note E, or our starting point, an octave up, and we could do our first arpeggio of the scale again starting from the 12th fret. So this would be 12, 16, 19. So I'm going to play all of those together and try to follow along with me and play. So open, 4th fret, 7th fret, 2nd fret, 5th fret, 9th fret, 4th fret, 7th fret, 11th fret, 5th fret, 9th fret, 12th fret, 7th fret, 11th fret, 14th fret, 9th fret, 12th fret, 16th fret. Then our last one is 11th fret, 14th fret, 17th fret, and then we're back at the note we started with, and we can play again the same that we started with at the 12th fret to make the first chord or arpeggio of the scale again. So for the last piece of what I want to show you in today's lesson, I want to show how you can apply this knowledge to actual chord voicings or ways of playing the chords rather than just the exercise of playing these arpeggios. So the idea behind learning this way of understanding the chords is so that you just have a better understanding of why there are different chords in different keys. And this can apply to a number system that is used by a lot of songwriters that I've worked with. A lot of different bands, different musicians will communicate in the number system. So when someone says go to the 4 chord or go to the 5 chord or the 2 chord or whatever you might hear, this approach can help you understand what that means and understand why the chord qualities, whether it's major, minor, or diminished, are different for each of those points in the scale. So what I'm going to show you now is voicings that go along with each of these arpeggios. So I'm going to start with the arpeggio and then show a voicing that moves up, moving up with each arpeggio as we go. So the voicings, or the way of playing these chords that I'm going to use, are all going to be on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings. And to begin, it's going to be 3 notes taken straight out of our open E chord. If you just isolate the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings in that chord, you have the first chord. So this is going to match and map onto the same notes that we played in the first arpeggio that goes along with the scale. So to review, that was the open 1st string, the note which is E, the 4th fret, which is G sharp, and the 7th fret, which is B. And so I'm going to map those onto the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings, and now I have my E at the 2nd fret of the 4th string, I have a G sharp at the 1st fret of the 3rd string, and then I have B at the open 2nd string. So this is my first triad shape. So listen to this. And then listen to this. So those are all the same notes. It's in a different octave, but I'm putting these together so you have a chord shape to practice and use in your playing. So if we go from there, the second chord that we're going to create is going to start on this note, 2nd fret of the 1st string, which is F sharp, the A, and C sharp, which will create what we call an F sharp minor chord. And the way that I'm playing this in the chord voicing is with my 3rd finger at the 4th fret of the 4th string, my 1st finger then barring the 2nd fret on both the 2nd and the 3rd string. So my 1st chord was E major, 2nd chord F sharp minor. Now the reason that this is a minor chord and this is a major chord is because of the difference in the interval between the 1st and 2nd note of that chord. If I look at the 1st chord arpeggio, starting on E and going to G sharp and then to B, the distance between E and G sharp is 2 whole steps. So if I went from E to F sharp at the 2nd fret to G sharp at the 4th fret, that's going to be 2 whole steps. And the interval name for 2 notes that are 2 whole steps apart is a major third. If I look at the 2nd arpeggio of the scale, starting on F sharp or the 2nd fret of the 1st string, and I go up to A at the 5th fret, and then C sharp at the 9th fret, I'm looking at the interval between this note and that note. And now, instead of 2 whole steps like it was with the arpeggio starting on E, this is going to be now a whole step and then a half step. So it's 1 half step smaller of an interval than the one that we have in this arpeggio. So when we have this note to this note being 1 whole step plus 1 half step, that interval is called a minor third. And the minor third is what creates the sound of a minor chord. So that would be our 2nd chord. So we have E major, our 2 chord is minor, F sharp minor. The next one is going to be built off of the 3rd note of the scale. So it's going to be the 3rd note, the 5th note, and the 7th note. And if I look here between my 3rd note of the scale and the 5th note of the scale, this is again a whole step and a half step, making this a minor chord again. So I'm going to use my shape from F sharp minor, and I'm going to move it up a whole step. Now I've got G sharp minor. So the first 3 chords of the scale are E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor. Now if I go back to my 1st string and I go to the 4th note of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I build the arpeggio off of that note, I have A, and then I go up from the 5th fret to the 9th fret to the 12th fret. And I can look at this distance between the first 2 notes of that arpeggio, and I can figure out that this is a whole step and that would be another whole step. So this is an interval that's 2 whole steps apart. And like I said, for the 1st chord, that makes a major third. In this case, it makes our 4th chord of the scale a major chord, which in this case is A major. So back from E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, our 4th chord is A major. The 5th note of the scale is B at the 7th fret, and if I make my arpeggio from here, I have B at the 7th fret, the 11th fret, which is D sharp, and then the 14th fret, which is F sharp. If I look at this interval here, I have a major third because these notes are 2 whole steps apart. So this is also going to be a major chord. So I have my E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major is my 5th chord. So moving on to the 6th note of the scale, the 6th note is C sharp at the 9th fret, and if we make our arpeggio from here, we go 9th fret C sharp, 12th fret, E, and then the 16th fret, which is G sharp. And again, I'm looking at the interval between the first note and the second note of the arpeggio. So this is a whole step plus a half step, which is a minor third. So this 6th chord is going to be a C sharp minor. So I'm going to go back through these chords again, starting with E major, F sharp minor. We slide that same shape up a whole step to get to G sharp minor, the third note of the third chord of the scale. Go back to our major shape for A, the 4th chord of the scale. Stay on the major shape for the 5th chord of the scale, B major. 6th chord is going to be C sharp minor, so it's going to be back to our minor shape, which is 11th fret here, and then barred with first finger at the 9th fret on the 2nd and 3rd string. And now the last shape is going to be different than the other 6. This one is kind of a special one because it contains 2 smaller intervals. So you have the 11th fret on the 1st string, which is D sharp, the 14th fret, which is F sharp, and the 17th fret, which is A. And in this case, we have 2 minor thirds happening. We have a whole step and a half step brings us a minor third, and then another whole step and a half step gets us another minor third. So this is a unique shape in this scale. So this is going to be what we call a diminished chord, and the shape is going to be here. So we're going to be at the 13th fret on the 4th string, the 11th fret on the 3rd string, and then the 10th fret on the 2nd string. And from there, we're going to be able to go back up to our 1st chord shape, an octave up, E major at the 12th fret. So I'm going to go through those chords slowly again. So we have E major, our 1st chord, F sharp minor, our 2nd chord, G sharp minor, our 3rd chord, A major, our 4th chord, B major, our 5th chord, C sharp minor, our 6th chord, and D sharp diminished, our 7th chord, and then we can go back to our E major shape and octave up to finish that out. So these chord qualities, the quality again meaning whether it's major, minor, or diminished, map onto every single key. These are patterns that apply to every major key because the way that chords are derived from each major scale are exactly the same, and every major scale contains all of the same intervals. So if you're in a different key, you could understand what chords fit into that key in the exact same way that I did here. The 1st chord is going to be major, the 2nd chord of the key is going to be minor, the 3rd chord of the key is going to be minor again, the 4th chord of the key is going to be major, the 5th chord of the key is going to be major, the 6th chord is going to be minor, and the 7th chord will be diminished. Now, there are lots and lots of examples of songs that use chords that aren't derived exactly from the major scale, so this doesn't always clear up every question about what chords fit or what chords might be in a certain song, but it's a really great starting point because lots and lots and lots of songs use chords exclusively from one single major scale, and they put them into all different combinations. The most common combinations would be some sort of combination of the 1st chord, the 4th chord, and the 5th chord, and oftentimes the minor 6th chord also. But I'm going to show you this chord pattern going up and down in a way that I suggest practicing it. You don't have to know the names of each of these chords in order to get a lot out of this concept and out of this practice. If you simply internalize the number of each chord and what type of chord it is, whether it's major or minor or diminished, that will greatly help you in any key that you happen to be in, and you don't necessarily need to know the name of every single chord in that key. So I'm going to demonstrate one more time the chords going up and down. So, a couple of last observations before I sign off for this lesson. I want to show that you can apply this same idea, the same single string scale, to any position, any key on the guitar. The pattern doesn't change. So if I choose a random fret on the guitar, say I start here, the 5th fret of the 4th string, I could use the same exact pattern that I did for my open E scale that I've been showing you, and I could go all the way up and down on this scale in the same way. All of the distances or intervals between those notes are the exact same, and this is true on any fret of the guitar, is also true on any other instrument. This is a universal theory pattern that can be applied and used to understand music at a deeper level. So if you found this lesson helpful, consider liking and subscribing to my channel. You can visit my website at practicemakesbettermusic.com, where I have free lessons coming out on a regular basis, and I have an email list that if you sign up, I'll keep you updated on all the new free stuff I've got coming out and some courses that I have in development. I hope this lesson was helpful for you, and that I was able to provide some insight and a way of thinking about the guitar and music theory that maybe you hadn't been familiar with before. So until next time, happy practicing.